America is home to 33 million small businesses, the beating heart of communities across the country.
And proof that the American dream is still alive.
This is a show about those dreamers and doers and the communities they serve.
Their real life stories.
Their struggles and successes.
Their grit, determination, and passion.
And the people who fight
to keep their American dream alive.
I'm Alfredo Ortiz.
I'm Elaine Parker.
And it's time for another episode of Main Street Matters,
America's small business megaphone.
Hi, and welcome back to another episode of Main Street Matters, America's small business megaphone. I'm Elaine Parker, the president of the Job Creators Network Foundation.
And I'm Jordan Bruno, vice president of Job Creators Network.
You can subscribe to the show at salempodcastnetwork.com or wherever you get your podcast from. Today, we are rejoined by our very good friend, John McLaughlin. He is the CEO and partner of McLaughlin and Associates. He's worked professionally as a strategic consultant and pollster for over 40 years. Hopefully you don't mind me saying that, John. He's earned a reputation for helping some of America's most successful corporations and winning some of the toughest elections in the nation, including the most recent one with Donald J. Trump. Welcome to the show, John.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be here. It's an honor because you forgot to mention I get to do the bi-monthly poll, the every other month poll that we do for the Job Creators Network with Scott Rasmussen. We do that together for you, and it's quite an honor. And it's been, by the way, quite a very good benchmark, and the only benchmark that's scientific of small business owners and employers in the United States, and you've got quite a track record with it. What's really interesting in that poll, the small business owners supported Donald Trump 51 to 34, and the demographics of that poll, it was 37% Republican, 30% Democrat, which is very close to the actual exit polls from CNN and the other outlets, which had 35% Republican for the turnout on election day and 31% Democrat. So you've been a key barometer for the last couple of years, and it's a real important guide to small business owners across the country.
I was actually looking back. Do you realize that we've been doing that poll for 3.5 years now? Yes,
and you really have charted, because what happened is small business owners represented the sentiment and optimism of, I think, all Americans. In the summer of 2021, it was pretty optimistic that the economy would get better because your index that you set up that's very useful about national and their own sentiments about their business. And then it started to nosedive, just as public opinion nosedived in the United States when Biden and Harris kicked in inflation in September of 2021, plus they surrendered Afghanistan then. And, small business owners got more pessimistic because they reflect their customers. They see what's going on in the real world. And now this post-election one you just did in December, we've had the highest since July of 2021. The index sentiment went up over 60%. So that was really good. And, there's optimism now, but there's the hard work's ahead because...
Yeah. But it was the future outlook. That was what was interesting is if you ask them how they're doing right now, they said not so good. Inflation's still killing me. High prices, high energy is still killing me. But the future outlook is what jumped by, I think it was like 7 or 8 points. It was a pretty big jump. And that's what made it look like such a big jump. So it is all about the future. I've been saying for weeks now, everybody's in such a good mood. And I love it. I love talking to all these people because they're in such a good mood. And I just think how bad it could have been if it hadn't turned out the way it did.
True. It is. It's like you can see it in your surveys. We see it in the national surveys, although still most Americans, in our post-election poll that we put on our website, McLaughlinonline.com, most Americans still are afraid the economy could get worse. 4 to 5 are still dealing with the negative impact of inflation. Small business owners, roughly 4 to 5, are telling us that higher prices, cost of living, et cetera, are their concerns for their business. And, that's a challenge because you've got where in your survey, in the Job Creators Network survey, you've got strong support for the Department of Government Efficiency, basically the ability to cut significantly in the federal spending, so that, I mean, you can make the tax cuts permanent, the Trump tax cuts permanent. They want to see that. They want stability and certainty in that regard. They also want to have some sort of balanced budget, and that's what cutting back the spending is. And they certainly want to secure the border. So, because remember, almost half your small business owners say crime is increasing in their areas, and they truly blame a lot of it on illegal immigration.
Have you polled on the Doge generally? I know we asked about it in our poll, and it has strong support. And the reason why I ask is support for the Doge partisan, or is there support from Democrats on cutting government spending as well?
There is support. Republicans are more supportive, and so are independents. But we found 71% of all voters support it. So they want the government to be more efficient. They want those reforms made, because you think about it, most of the government goes back to 20th century institutions. The federal government is an anachronism. Small businesses have to keep up, but the federal government. You realize most federal employees in Washington don't have to go into the office. They had a 5-year some order from the Biden administration during COVID. They had a 5-year we can work remote. I mean, businesses can't run like that. They have to be where their customers are. And granted, most customers for the federal government are outside the Beltway, but they're still not in their offices. So.
Right.
So that gets even higher support getting from all voters, getting federal employees back into their offices, back into serving the public.
Yeah.
John, can you give us a post-mortem on the polling from the election? I mean, once again, polls were off. Can you give a sense of what your analysis of why that was, and maybe what your polling was showing that the main players weren't?
Well, in the Trump campaign, our polls fortunately were pretty accurate. We forecast a seven state swing state battleground state sweep, and Donald Trump made it happen. Also, we had him ahead in the popular vote for like 2 years. I mean, when he won the nomination, we were ahead in the national popular vote by 2 points. We had him the day before he debated Joe Biden. We released a national survey. It was up to and think of all the things that happened. After that debate, the media came down on Biden. Trump survived by the grace of God, an assassin's bullet. He had a united convention in Milwaukee. The Republican Party was united. That Sunday, Joe Biden pulls himself out, handpicks Kamala Harris. We take a survey that we released the first week of August. Trump's still up 2. Newt Gingrich, who works with us, did a survey for his American New Majority project. Beginning of September, Trump's up 2. We won the race by 2 points. So the popular vote, our polls were highly accurate. Tony Fabrizio and myself in the campaign. Tony had 4 of the battleground states. I had 3. We had Trump winning in our firm surveys, Nevada, North Carolina, Georgia. In the end, Tony absolutely had him winning in Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Arizona. And fortunately, Donald Trump made it happen. In fact, 8 days out, because I went to the rally in the Garden with, and it was a great rally that they had in New York City, where Trump was speaking to the country, and he had a great week that week. And he'd done the Joe Rogan podcast before. It was like 3 hours, and I was getting, small business owners, young voters coming up to me. I never got such a reaction to it because he mentioned my name someplace 48 minutes into it, and so I told him that. I said, I'd heard that his son Barron had suggested these podcasts to him, just like this one. We got to get him on your podcast. But I said, your son Barron's a genius. So he called me and I said, we're ahead and it's 8 days out. And all you have to do now is make your putts, keep on working hard, deliver. The polls have you ahead. Do what you got to do. Keep out working her. He was going to 3 or 4 states a day, and he was giving speeches at his rallies, which were packed, of like 2 hours time in length. If he had the time, he would do it. And I'm saying just close strong. I said, because you remember 8 days out, Mitt Romney was ahead by a point. And then he ignored, after Hurricane Sandy, he had ignored that. And, Obama went in and hugged Chris Christie, gave him some money. Obama's ahead by 1 point on Sunday, 1 point on Monday. He won the popular vote by 4 points. That was in 8 days. And President Trump, what he says to me at the end of that statement, he says, "I'm not Mitt Romney." So he proved his pollsters right. He worked very hard, but the country was ready for it. Whether you're a small business owner, whether you're a worker, the average person was impacted by inflation. They were concerned about crime and fentanyl because of the open borders. They're worried. Younger voters are worried about the endless war. What happens to them? Because who gets called up if there's something serious that happens? People were really upset about crime in their communities. There's so many problems that basically the new administration that Donald Trump would have to solve to put the country back in the right policy direction, because we still are suffering from inflation. We're still concerned that we could go into a recession and the economy could get worse.
Mm-hmm. And while we're filming this, the news is that Trump is suing the Des Moines Register over their faulty poll. Maybe you can just speak, based on your expertise, to some of the problems with the competing polls out there, some of the substandard polls that New York Times, the mainstream media really picked up on and ran with.
Yeah, well, I've had to, having advised President Trump for years and worked for his 2016 campaign and 2020 campaign, the mainstream media had a history of underpolling President Trump, where they would deliberately just not as poll as many Republicans. So, remember there was a Hillary Clinton lock. She was going to win 2016, and we said, no, we could win a very close electoral victory. That proved to be true. There was the Biden blue wave. There were polls right before election had us down 10 points in the national popular vote. And we're saying, no, we could win. And out of 160 million votes, we only lost that election in 3 states by 44,000. In Georgia, it was roughly 11,000 votes, Arizona 11,000 votes, and Wisconsin 20,000 votes. Otherwise, he would have had an electoral majority again. This election, that Iowa poll, I mean, the Saturday night when it came out, I texted Susie Wiles and Chris Lusby in the campaign. I said, they've underpolled Republicans, because during the primary, when I was the only pollster in the campaign, we knew Iowa very well. We were winning big in the caucus. There was a lot of grassroots support. And we never polled it in the general election because we didn't think it was in play. And so when I saw the result, it was making international news. I literally had clients from overseas saying, "Is this poll accurate?" And when you got into the poll, they didn't use a voter list. They did random digit dial. They allegedly screened adults for if they were likely to vote. And then they said they weren't fully transparent. They said they would. They said it was weighted by congressional district, age, and party. When you got the internals, it was only +2 Republican. If you go back to the 2020 exit polls and those models that the media had in a record turnout, it was +10 Republican. So if you adjusted for a 2020 turnout, he was, we should have been up 6 and closer to double digits. And on election night, so the next day, by the way, Susie Wiles calls and says, "You got to give me a memo on that poll." And I'm like, okay. So I sent her a memo on the poll and what was wrong with it. And she said at the same time, take a look at the New York Times Siena polls. And I said I would. And I sent her the memo. And so I called her back after I got the memo on Sunday afternoon. Susie says, so I said to her, "Are you going to release the memo?" And she says to me, "No, he read it. He's happy now." I'm like, okay. Because I'm so used to, for President Trump, once I reassured him that the poll was a bad poll, because for years, I mean, we went through this in 2 previous campaigns, and we were trying to hold, both myself and Tony Fabrizio are trying to hold the media to, hey, you've got exit polls of real voters of turning out in the past, and you have voter history, you have databases of voters. if you actually do a good quality poll that reflects actual turnout, they wouldn't have those kinds of skews. And that's what happened. So they had another agenda. They've always, I think the media, they want to believe those polls. But remember, in 2020, there was a poll in Wisconsin a week before the election, had President Trump losing by 17 points in Wisconsin. And it was 6 a.m. in Las Vegas at the time. And he calls me up and I'm at my desk and he says, "What's the matter with this poll?" And I said, the Washington Post poll, I said, it's skewed 8 points Democrat. It should be dead even. There's some other things wrong with it. And he says, "Why would they put out a poll that's so skewed?" And I said, "Well, it's Wisconsin, and they know that the Democrats are voting 2-1 early in mail. Your vote's waiting for Election Day. They're going to vote for you 2-1. If it's cold and snowy and they think you're going to lose and there's long lines, maybe they're hoping your voters won't show up." And, Wisconsin, again, out of 3 million votes, it was 20,000 votes. It was only 20,000 votes that we lost back then. And so maybe it did have an impact. But this time around, Wisconsin went back from Donald Trump, and it was close, but the polls reflected it was going to be close.
John, why? Like, I mean, I don't mean to sound so, like it's such a dumb question, but is the goal here to depress the Trump voters? Because we've seen it in 2016, we've seen it in 2020, and we've seen it in 2024. Like, there's a concerted effort to underpoll and so that Trump is losing in the polls. And I'm assuming they just want to depress people. Why bother? He's going to lose, that kind of thing. But what I keep seeing is all it does is energize the Trump voters because they think it's all BS.
Well, you're exactly right, because in our post-election survey that we did that we published at our firm, of all voters, 1,000 voters across the country voted either early or on Election Day, they said the media was biased against Donald Trump, 54 to only 26 saying biased against Harris. So the voters know it, and Trump voters, it's like 80%. They just expect it. And your question is right on. Why did they do this? Well, they do it because the media is not unbiased. The media has a point of view. There's very few, people go to podcasts like this to get the truth. Because look at the ratings for the mainstream media. Look at the ratings for CNN, MSNBC. I mean, right now you have Newsmax, which is a newcomer, fourth among the news channels and beating CNN at night. And Fox News was built. I knew Roger Ailes, who was a friend of President Trump's. He built Fox News by taking the conservatives off the CNN viewership. So people are looking for the truth, and the explosion of podcasts. If you're a small business person, well, I'm going to listen to Elaine and Jordan because they'll tell me what's really going on, the facts. But people have to hunt for the truth now. And the media bias, yes, they are politically biased. They look at Stephanopoulos. It's going to cost him personally, I think, $1 million. It's costing ABC $15 million to the Trump library because they went and said something that wasn't true. I mean, the age of Walter Cronkite and Huntley and Brinkley, for those old 20th century news outlets where they tried to, even Dan Rather at some point tried to be unbiased in the 20th century, and then the 21st century that went out the window. It's opinion journalism now, so their bias shows.
Well, so I was kind of surprised about the settlement myself, regardless of when you read the statements that were said, just because of the First Amendment and press. And I'm sure that there are some journalists who were kind of like, wow. My guess, and some of the write-ups and speculation I've seen, is that the settlement, and I know I'm this is my own thoughts too, but is because they don't want other things to come out in their internal memos and things like that, that some of that probably would have been more damaging for them than actually just writing a check for $15 million and making this go away, is their internal memos and any emails, correspondence inside would have been just devastating for them.
Yeah, well, probably, but I'm not a lawyer, but I can only guess because I have to deal with it in the polls. But you look at it. I mean, a lot of news organizations are now populated by career journalists. Instead, you have, I mean, George Stephanopoulos. He helped elect Bill Clinton, and he worked for Bill Clinton. You have other media outlets where basically partisan Democrats have gone into those outlets, and it's really hard for them not to reflect those views. And I'm very upfront with people that, yep, I work for a Republican, and a lot of times when I do bipartisan projects, it's to have that balance where you have a Democrat. But a lot of the news media, the balance of the old crossfires where you had Mark Shields and Bob Novak, that's gone. They just literally cut the Trump people out. It's rare that Trump people are on certain networks, and so. But because of that, your podcast gets value because we have to get out the truth.
And I understand the news organizations bringing in, the political talking heads, but they shouldn't present it as hard news. I mean, they should be opinion shows. There's a commentator on CNN, Scott Jennings, that I've just been following, and he's a former George Bush administration guy. And I just can't believe that CNN has kept him on because he's got fantastic arguments. And it's not that I don't think he's really been a huge Trump supporter in the past as much as he's just, none of this makes sense. He's just logical.
Yep. And he's a balance. And what's really different is the voters, because, I mean, there was a point in July of 21. No, it was February 21. I had to go see President Trump, and it was during his impeachment trial. He's out of office. We're at Mar-a-Lago in his office, myself, Jason Miller, and I think a couple others of his staff are there. And we're going over a battleground state survey of the 17 battleground states that we did in January after he left office. And we're reading the survey, and he's watching. The senators are debating whether to convict him. I mean, here they are. They're trying to stop him from running again. And they're debating whether to convict him of some sort of, collusion or whatever, again, conspiracy.
Russia.
No, it wasn't that one. It was the one after. That one was made up. That was discredited. But it's like they're trying to convict him so he can't run again of insurrection or whatever. And I was sitting there reading this poll, and I said, do you realize 63% of Republicans want you to run for president again? I mean, it wasn't even close. It was 63%. And in spite of all that, and, he basically, and I said to him, I said, you realize, just like Ronald Reagan, so I'm older, you said over 40 years. I used to work for Arthur Finkelstein, who was one of Reagan's pollsters in the 80s. And I said, this is like Reagan, because after he didn't get the nomination in 76, after 4 years of failure with Jimmy Carter, we elected Reagan in a landslide, a similar popular vote. He got 50%, and Carter only got 43%. But I said, after Biden fails, and he will fail because he's got these liberal policies, when he fails, there'll be buyer's remorse, and they'll want you to run again. Except Biden failed worse than Jimmy Carter. I mean, it got so bad, he pulled himself out of the race. And he handpicked Kamala Harris as vice president to run, but it was amazing when you looked at the polls. That's what the voters were telling us then, and the Republicans wanted Trump to run again, and there was that apprehension that Biden was going to fail. If Biden had been a moderate Democrat, who knows?
Mm-hmm. Ron, the polling you've done for us showed 12% more. Trump was leading by 12 points over Harris going into the election. And the actual number was 17 points favored for Trump over Harris. Over your career, how have you seen small business support among the two parties change? And were you surprised by that 17-point result? And how do you see it going forward?
Well, I think, no, I wasn't surprised by the 17-point lead, but I think how it's changed is the small business network. When you look at it, I mean, for years, the media focuses on labor. Well, where's organized labor? And a lot of labor unions right now are government employee labor unions, whether it's a teachers union or whether it's SEIU or hospital workers, et cetera, like that. They're basically government unions. And the old trades and construction unions have moved right. Manufacturers have moved right. I mean, Trump support. But small business, when you ask if you're in a labor union household or you're in a small business, if somebody in your household runs or operates a small business, there's more small business owners than there are labor. And basically the small business network is a network that smart Republicans use to offset government employee unions who are pro Democrat. So it's become more important. And the small business owners are more diverse. I mean, you have a certain amount that are Hispanic, that are African American, that are women owned, that are veteran owned. They're becoming more and more. It's a democratic institution. I mean, it's wonderful. It's like small business owners are like really more important to the economy. They create the jobs. They're in touch, and basically, it has out muscled the government employee unions. So for Donald Trump, it was really important because, hey, what's really interesting at one point, we were doing better with African American voters than historically Republicans do, and certainly Hispanic voters. And people are saying, well, how, who is it? In the campaign, they're telling me, well, who are these African Americans? Who are these Hispanic voters who are coming to us? A good number of them, particularly among African Americans, were men. And a lot of them had college degrees, and, they were tilting towards Trump. And I'm like, they want to be Donald Trump. They want to have a business. They want to succeed. And he's a role model to them, and he's their blue collar billionaire. And so they're looking at Donald Trump and they're saying, that's what I want to have the same opportunities he's had. And so it has become more and more important because, like, specifically with Hispanic voters, I tell my colleagues, I'm like, we're not realigning yet. We've rented those voters through one election, but you got to prove through policies that you have to succeed now. You have to make the tax cuts permanent. You have to have no taxes on tips or overtime, so they can find more workers. Particularly small business owners, they're finding it hard to get workers in a lot of times. Because if you give workers, like they did during COVID, a chance to, hey, you could have a paycheck from the government and stay home. Just some people stay home. If on the other hand, if there's no tax on Social Security, older workers come back into the job market. If there's no tax on tips, people will work those service industries where you can get tips. If there's no tax on overtime, people will do more overtime. So there's a method to Donald Trump's tax cuts, because some of it's by gut, but a lot of it is he rewards work. He wants people to work. And that could be a great, and you're seeing it with these small business owners, and 6 out of 10 small business owners in the last poll still are afraid if things get worse for the economy, they might have to close. And you saw that all through last year and the year before. And so there's still an apprehension, but there's an optimism where literally I have a friend who owns 4 restaurants, and he told me if Donald Trump didn't win, he was going to close 2 of them. Because he was just afraid, because the corporate tax rate is, Elaine, you had done really well. The corporate tax rate going from 21 to 28. Well, that's the C Corps. That's 1 million small businesses, right? That's a third of the people in your surveys. So if you lose 7% of your profits to the government or net revenues to the government, how do you stay in business? They're on thin margins already. And then, subchapter S, well, the income taxes were going to go up if the Trump tax cuts disappeared, like Harris wanted to disappear. So if income taxes go up on subchapter S's and the corporate rate goes up on C Corps for small businesses, there's going to be probably millions of jobs lost in the economy. It would be a disaster.
That's why we kept saying, when Kamala Harris would talk about raising the corporate income tax rate, she would refer to the greedy corporations And I would remind people that it's a million small businesses, that they want you to believe that it's Amazon and, Apple and companies like that are going to get hit with it. They don't care. They just pass those costs right on to the consumer. It's the small businesses. And I would continue to make that argument over and over and over again, so that people recognize this was about small business for sure. So, but I will tell you 2 stories real quick. I sat on a plane right after the election, next to a lady who was in some kind of production for actually a broadcast company. I won't mention it, but and she said she makes a lot of her money in overtime, and that is the reason why she voted for Trump. Was for that. So she was super excited about that, because she said it gets to a point where it's not worth working the overtime, because she loses so much in taxes. So, and then one more story in someone who supported Trump that just shocked me. My neighbor is German and moved here probably a little less than 10 years ago. Her husband's job brought them here. And so she finally got her citizenship. They love it here. So she started her business. She's a real estate agent. She's built a very successful real estate business. And she's so good at marketing, and she just loves it. Well, the last 4 years have killed her, particularly mortgage rates. All of that has really hurt the real estate industry. You've seen housing just plummet on sales. And so I saw her at a Christmas party, and my friends obviously know what I do and the advocacy that we work on. And so she comes up to me and she says, "Aren't you so excited?" In a kind of a low voice. "Aren't you so excited that Trump got elected?" And I was stunned, and I looked at her. They're from Germany. They socialist country. I never would have guessed. And I said, "Did you vote this election?" And she goes, "Yes, I got my citizenship last year. This was my first election, and I voted for Trump." And she was like, things are going to get better now. She was so excited at the idea of how it was going to turn the housing around and bring down the mortgage rates. And I just thought it was amazing. She did tell me, though, her husband, although he's not eligible to vote yet, would vote differently from her. And I said, well, that's okay, because he didn't get the chance to cancel your vote out this time.
Well, he's got to get a subscription to your podcast.
Yeah, I know.
That'll straighten him out. But that's the hard part. Now, this is optimism, but still it has to get done. And you're listening to them in Washington. And, I worked for Senator Thune in his first race when he was losing 2-1 for Congress. And we turned around and we won 2-1. But now he's the Senate Majority Leader, and the people in Washington that are advising him, they're telling him, you can't get the tax cuts done that quick or whatever. If he listens to Washington, those thin majorities we have in the Senate and in the House won't last. And Donald Trump, we've got to get these things done, because if we don't make the tax cuts permanent, if we don't pass by the way, these tax cuts are really popular. You got 7 out of 10 voters that are supporting no tax on overtime, no tax on tips, no tax on Social Security. It's over 4 to 5 voters. We've got to get these tax cuts passed. And already Washington is thinking of ways that, well, we can't let that happen because we'll lose all this revenue. Because they don't want to cut back. They don't want to, they don't want to make changes. So we've got to really we've won a political campaign, but now we have to win the policy.
If they wait till the end of next year to do this, small businesses will have already made their plans to expect a tax increase. If they do it now, right out of the gate in January, small businesses will be able to plan accordingly. I get that they have a legislative calendar, but I just implore the Senate Republicans to think about what it takes to run a business and the planning and how they have to think about their revenues. And they can't wait till December 15th of 2025 to make a change. It'd be like turning the Titanic for some businesses.
Right. When President Trump, I had some good polling for President Trump when he passed his first round of tax cuts in the first administration. And I said to him, the problem is you did healthcare first. and healthcare was like Stalingrad. And he said, well, they told me I needed the savings, McConnell and Ryan. I was like, you know, just actually tax cuts create revenue. I mean, I'm a true disciple of Larry Kudlow, Steve Forbes, Art Laffer, Steve Moore. And I said, it will create revenue and you'll grow the economy. You'll help us politically. And if we don't, we'll have a problem like Reagan had. For those of us who remember, Reagan's tax cuts didn't go into effect in his first term quick enough to avoid the midterm losses of 1982. So we lost 26 House seats. These Republicans can't afford to lose 26 House seats. They can't afford to lose 2 or 3. So you need the tax cuts to have economic growth, while the Democrats who would vote against tax cuts for tips or overtime or senior citizens on Social Security, they would do so at their own peril. Mm-hmm. And we have popular opinion with us now. We need to get those tax cuts passed because we need the growth in the midterm to be able to keep our majorities politically. And those small business owners, they're just trying to get through every day, they want to have a life where you get a few hours off, where you want to be able to take weekends off, where you want to have a little cash in the bank that you don't have to worry about. In your surveys, 37% told us they would cut back on expansions and growing their business if the tax cuts don't get passed. And another 24% would cut back on hours for their employees or cut back on their employees. So the Republicans, we got to walk and chew gum at the same time. You can secure the border, you can drill for oil, but you better start working on getting those tax cuts passed right away at the beginning of this year.
Well, he can do some of that by executive order because he did it before, but the tax cuts he can't. So, John, I want to thank you for coming on. I love to hear, the inside skinny on the campaign and the polling and help our listeners understand. Thanks so much for all you do on our poll as well for small businesses. We love it. We think that it's very appreciated by not only our audience, but obviously by the House and Senate Small Business Committees. So we think it's a great poll, and we want to definitely continue, setting the mark on small business sentiment there.
Well, thank you for the opportunity. Plus also thanks, you're a credit to our friend Bernie Marcus, because he was a great friend. And, right before the election, before he passed, he knew Donald Trump was going to win. And he was a great friend to the president. And, just like he built Home Depot and small, it was a small business, became big. We get to do that for your members now. We help guide them so that they can make the right decisions. And you're doing a great thing for the country. So we got to keep it going.
I think you're right. Bernie knew. And that's why he was good with going, because he knew that Trump was going to win. And that's what we thought, that if he didn't make it to the election, it would be because Donald Trump would win. Yep. And that's exactly what happened. It was literally hours before that election came in. So it was very, it was bittersweet. We lost a good friend and just a champion of free markets and free enterprise, and just a champion of freedom. So we're proud to carry that torch for him going forward. Well, where can people go to find out more about you and your polling and see other polls?
Well, you can go to McLaughlinonline.com, and you can go to your website to see the Small Business Owners poll, the Job Creators Network poll.
Yep, that's jobcreatorsnetwork.com. You can see our polling there. So, well, John, thanks so much for taking the time to join us on Main Street Matters, America's small business megaphone. Thank you all for taking the time to tune in. Main Street Matters is part of the Salem Podcast Network. New episodes debut every Wednesday and Friday. And we will be back soon with a new episode. You can also subscribe to the show at salempodcastnetwork.com, and we'll see you real soon.